Did you eventually get to on air at KUBE?
Yeah, well, being like I was the only Jewish person there, which I would say I'm Jew-ish. I have a very Jewish name. It was still celebrated both holidays.
Right.
I think some situation came up where, oh wow, we need somebody to be on the air, and the guy by the name of Jake Kaplan, he must be available.
Benztown president Dave Chachi Dennis loves radio and all of his radio friends.
Hey, Chachi.
Hey, everybody.
Because Chachi loves everybody.
My next guest is the director of imaging and sound design for Audacy. He's imaged some of the most respected radio stations on the planet, such as KUBE and The End in Seattle, Jack and KROQ here in LA, and he's also a highly esteemed VO talent, and he's been on the Benztown 50 for 7 years in a row. Please welcome Jake Kaplan.
What's up?
Hey, man.
Hey.
Thank you for coming in. This is actually the first time I've had someone actually in the studio with us. I think it's been almost a couple of years. Almost everyone else is on, on Riverside, which is fine, but this is better.
Yeah, I mean, I live so close to here. I've always said that. Why not come in? I'm probably the closest imaging person that lives close.
I think you probably are. Yeah, I think you are.
The Americana is like my mall, so
it's my mall too. I actually used to. I don't know if you knew or not, but I lived there for a little bit.
Oh, I did know that. Yeah,
it was kind of wild.
I heard about some wild parties.
Yeah. We tore that place up.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about. Well, first of all, we're going to get into this in a second, but you just got a massive, massive promotion. So let me congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
Because that is gigantic. I mean, you're overseeing all of the imaging, all of the production for all of Audacy, which is just incredible. So very happy for you.
Yeah. It's all not the commercial production, just to be clear. Just the
imaging part.
The imaging part, yeah.
Got it. Still a massive deal.
Yeah, no.
I'm
new role at Audacy too.
And we'll get into that in a few minutes, but I wanted to start off by congratulating you.
Thank you so much.
Your career on its own wasn't big enough, this is now just a whole new stratosphere.
Yeah, it's something different, and I'm super stoked to jump into it.
Tell me a little bit about growing up. What was it like when you were a kid? Did you fall in love with radio listening as a kid, or how did it come into your life?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely fell in love with radio growing up listening to KUBE in Seattle, where I later worked, which I'm sure we'll get into. But my mom was very into music. She was actually a dancer. She was a first ballet, and then she did modern dance.
Oh, no kidding.
So she was always really, really into current music. So, and she dragged me as I was a kid. She dragged me to her classes and her rehearsals.
Oh, wow.
And I think listening to the radio with her and just being around such current music as a kid, and watching MTV as a little kid. It was obviously new back then. Radio just seemed like the natural place for me, and I think I fell in love with it, as a kid.
To have a creative force like your mother must have been incredibly influential. I mean, that's pretty wild to have your mom actually be a professional dancer.
Yeah. That's where I learned an 8 count. I didn't realize that until I was older. But yeah, my mom always, she was a creative person who kind of later went into like a corporate job. And she always encouraged my sister and I to be creative people.
Oh, interesting. Did she regret going into a corporate position? Was it something she didn't enjoy?
I think so. Yeah, I think so a little bit. Yeah,
What was the first song? Do you remember the first song, or kind of the type of music that your mom gravitated towards?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't know. The song that comes to mind is Chaka Khan, I Feel For You.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know why. I remember listening to it on the radio and like the jock like messing around with the intro for some reason. And then my mom dancing to it, and like the two like, whoa, wait, like
it just
came together. Yeah, I don't know. That's the first one. I was a baby when that came out. But,
that's a great song though. Yeah. So that was like the
again. Wait, Chaka Khan.
Chaka Khan.
Yeah.
So your mom's obviously creative. She's encouraging you and your sister to explore creativity, and you go to a shadow day at KUBE. And what was that? Was it kind of like a work experience type?
Day?
So
I mean, I could not see this existing in this day and age, but we were supposed to call a local business and shadow a business leader.
Okay.
And I wanted to go to KUBE. That's where I wanted to go. And my dad's friend's brother was the former program director, general manager, a man named Bob Case.
Okay.
And he was the first person I called, and he said, sure, come on in, follow me around the radio station. And I went from office to office, and he threw me in the on-air studio to watch the DJ.
What an awesome experience.
Yeah, a guy who's still my friend. His name's John Connor. And yeah, I was a little kid, and like I was fascinated by how watching the DJ do his job.
Sure.
Radio, I was like, it was the coolest experience of my life. I was
how old
14.
Were you?
I was 14 at the time.
And then you had to go back to school, like write a report on it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. And most kids, I'm sure, they're going to like the doctor's office or to an auto mechanic, and you go to the radio station.
I by far had the most exciting of that whole project. That's for sure. Yeah.
So at that point, did you kind of realize that this is what you wanted to pursue? Was that the defining moment?
It really was, It's just funny. I was lucky enough to find something at that age that I was so passionate about. And, I do kind of like think back like, wow, what if I didn't do that? Like, what would growing up in the Seattle area and the tech boom going on, I'm so into computers. Like, could my life have gone in a totally different direction? Like something I'm questioning a lot now,
Yeah.
As happy as I am where I'm at, but it's just an interesting.
But you're right.
That experience really did change me. Yeah.
That city has so many different companies around it. Amazon, Microsoft, Costco. There's major Red Robin.
Yeah.
Both of us.
Yeah.
You could have ended up there, but
T-Mobile,
it worked out all right.
Yeah. Hey, this was the one I found, and it's been great. Yeah.
And I don't know if at one of those places you would have been able to explore the creativity that I think you really, especially knowing now about your mom, that you really crave.
Definitely,
which is, it would be nice to have been early on Amazon.
It would have been nice to be an Amazon employee in 1999 when I graduated from high school. That would have been great. Yeah.
So Shadow Day, how does that transition into an internship?
I believe I just kept pestering these people and calling them in a probably in a way they probably found very annoying. But just to come in and answer the phone. So I started doing it for a woman her name's Shelly Hart, who again is a great friend of mine still. And I took the bus into Seattle or maybe hitched a ride with somebody when I was 15. And for the summer, I'd go in there and answer the phones every day in the studio.
That's great.
And that was my first experience.
So you're screening phones, and then from there, they hire you to be a board op.
Board op. Yeah.
And then did you eventually get to on air at KUBE?
Yeah. Well, being like I was the only Jewish person there, which I would say I'm Jew-ish. I have a very Jewish name. It was still celebrated both holidays.
Right.
I think some situation came up where, oh, wow, we need somebody to be on the air, and the guy by the name of Jake Kaplan, he must be available. And somehow I did an on-air shift on Christmas night, which I was completely fine with. Yeah.
What was that like? To get your even on Christmas night in that day and age, to get the first opportunity to crack the mic in a major market, what Seattle's market, 14, 15?
14, something like that.
Something like that.
Also, it was Rhythm Rhythm CHR, which was the coolest format at the time. We're talking Puff Daddy, Notorious B.I.G., Mary J. Blige, peak.
Such a great era for music.
And I was in high school, and I was on the air. I still can't believe I was doing that at that age, and that people let me do that. I was like, is that even legal? But
did your classmates think you were pretty cool?
I don't really remember. I don't think they did. No,
no kidding. I would have thought you were cool.
I think there were some that did think it was really cool, and some played it off. In high school. I don't know.
Sure.
But definitely now people tell me like, oh, that was really cool. You were on the radio. Now they do, but looking back. But yeah.
How did you gravitate to, you're not only a phenomenal VO talent, and we'll go into that in a few minutes and how that all started off, but how did you get into imaging, which you're, looked upon as one of the best in the world now, but how did you start as a board op on air? What made you then get an interest into the imaging side of the business?
So it's pretty interesting. So I was at the station, and the station itself was just very, very into imaging, Pro Tools. There was an imaging person there who you might know, Steve Thomas.
I'm so excited to get into this. Yeah, Steve Steve's a full-on just legend. Yeah. If you're going to learn from someone, that's like that's the equivalent of Ralph Macchio learning from Miyagi, right?
Yeah.
He was
definitely
the wax on, wax off of imaging and production. So
So I mean, obviously when he was there, he was starting Real World, and the station was, and there was another gentleman there by the name of Vic Orlando, who was the voiceover person, another guy named Paul Hazelip, who was kind of a junior imaging person. But and Mike Tierney was the program director, who's now at Amazon Music.
Sure.
So imaging was very center at that radio station, and the use of technology. They were on the Mac. They were using Mac. The Macintosh computer, Apple. Ever heard of them? Sorry, I don't know why. And I knew how to use those from school, and they were using Pro Tools, and imaging was such a big part in these really funny, creative promos that I got just, as I was fascinated with the on-air product, I walked into the studio and I thought, wow, this is interesting to me. This is amazing.
And you were just, you like the sounds, you love the technology. And
a big thing was the technology. And actually, there's a really funny story about the technology. So I grew up, I was a little kid, and they were on a Macs, Macintosh computers, I don't know why, Apple computers. And I was, in my high school, I grew up in the Microsoft area. I mean, all the Microsoft employees were there.
Right.
And we had all these Macintoshes. We didn't have any PCs. Everything was Mac. So I knew how to use the Mac. I was just obsessed with that computer. And I later found out, I think I had an interview with somebody at Apple for a job a long time ago.
Right.
That Steve Jobs had donated all the Macs to my the school district.
No
this person
way.
This HR person had been at Apple for a long time. He's like, oh yeah, Steve would donate computers to all those schools that had a lot of Microsoft students.
That's pretty diabolical.
Yeah. And that was how, it was really the Macintosh computer and then, the love of sound that really got me into production. And it was I saw all those things.
Sure.
Steve and Vic and all these people doing this production. I was like, oh, I know how to do this. I love this, So, yeah.
Did Steve and I'm enamored by Steve. Obviously, as you know, and most people certainly in our space, that Real World is a competitor. But I've got so much respect. Those guys blaze trails, and you look back at Frost and Chase and Jim Cook and so many of those guys. We wouldn't be where we are today if those guys didn't start this kind of imaging space as it is today. What was he like? What was it like when you first walked in there? Did he kind of take you in under his shoulder? Or under his arm?
Yeah, I think he just said, "Oh, sure, you want to sit here and watch me? Great." I think he made me feel welcome because he made a lot of funny jokes,
right?
And I don't really remember. I just remember sitting there and just watching. Can I just sit here and watch you? And he said, "Sure, yeah."
And just
sit here and watch me.
In.
Yeah, and I watched the whole creative process from writing some copy and with the VO guy coming in and building a promo from the ground up. And I watched them do this and just, I was a good kid. I'd sit there quietly and just watch and not jump in. And I'm seeing the room, and it was this tiny studio with no acoustic tiles or anything in an office. It was barely a studio. But the use of sound and, getting different drops. I remember grabbing going out to rent a VCR up the street because he wanted a drop for the promo or something like that. Just things like that, being resourceful and yeah.
That was probably some of the best times of your life, right?
Oh
just
my
that,
God, yeah. And it wasn't just I think now, this was the TikTok of what was going on at the time. That's the best way to describe what radio was in 1997.
Such a good way of putting it. You're 100% right. Totally. It really was. So from there, you actually go and you leave Seattle because you get the gig, and I love the name of this, at the Funky Monkey in Tacoma.
Yeah, it was kind of like an offshoot of the same company.
Okay.
It was it was like an LMA radio station that they ran.
Got it. So they gave you an opportunity and they said, hey, we see a lot in you, Jake. Why don't you go up and run the Funky Monkey? And you actually were the program director?
Yeah, I think I just naturally just turned into that position. There was nobody else that wanted to work there. and I did everything, man. It was I guess they called it a rap rock station.
A rap rock station?
I think that was the name. It was all this Limp Bizkit and Korn and all this rhythmic rock that was really popular at that time.
Okay.
Linkin Park.
Got it.
And it was basically a station. I think it's kind kind of the similar to what Indie 103.1 did back in the day here in LA, where it was just there to kind of mess with the competition.
Right.
You know, the end was really dominant, and I think that this group of people wanted to have something that was competing with...
Be a flanker.
A flanker, yes. Yeah. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
And you know, I was the crazy person that said, oh yeah, I'll drive to Tacoma every day.
So you were driving. How far of a drive is that?
Oh, it's only like 40 minutes.
Oh,
really
okay. Got it.
Far, yeah.
Got it. Okay. But I mean, they have you.
I don't know why I didn't just move down there, but
that still
too
was
cool for that, I think.
How old were you at that time?
19.
I mean, so you're 19, and even though it's a smaller flanker station, to give you that type of responsibility, people at an early age really saw something in you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of responsibility.
I'm really lucky and great people too.
Yeah.
You know?
And so you're running programming the station. You're also doing the imaging. Are you still doing on air at that time?
We didn't have any on-air DJs, but imaging was such an important part of the station.
Okay.
So I did some of the imaging. We would freelance it out, but I would write it. I mean, I'd use a lot of the same kind of processes that I only knew from KUBE.
Got it.
This new format that I was...
So you've taken a lot. I mean, so really, Steve's taught you a lot, and you've taken now his tutelage. And
Steve and some of the other people too. I
Sure.
got to give credit due to other people too, because Steve later moved on to
bigger and better
things and left that place. But yeah.
Sidebar, where is he? I've heard he's doing like movies and television now. Is that correct?
I don't know. You know, it's funny because I hit him up. He sent me a birthday wish, and I said, hey, but he didn't. I don't know what he's doing, to be honest with you. Yeah, I was trying to find out that information.
Yeah. I imagine he's doing incredibly well, and obviously Mike's done an amazing job with the company. So
yeah, definitely
had a tremendous amount of success.
Yeah.
So you're imaging, you're doing everything. So you're really kind of becoming very well rounded at this point, though.
And scheduling the music too, which actually I really enjoyed.
Did you?
Yeah,
the music director aspect of it. Yeah, I did too. That was actually something that was really fun for me. Is just kind of digging into Selector, and it was almost like a fun puzzle, if you will. Really
exactly. Yes. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But are you kind of seeing now of all aspects of the business that imaging is really the part that you love the most?
Yeah, I really did. Like, I mean, there was, when it came to music scheduling, I loved the music scheduling, and I didn't really like listening to a bunch of new music and dealing with record labels, which I was terrible at. Of course, there were much better people in that market to navigate that politics. But yeah, like the dinners and all this stuff, I wasn't into it. I did like the scheduling, but yeah, imaging was like really the thing when I really got to sit there and at the time really think about what I wanted to do, like imaging just felt like the natural place for me and what I enjoyed most.
And it was, I think, something you chose very wisely, because obviously you've had a tremendous amount of success in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always find it fascinating
cool.
how people kind of fall into, if you will, what it is that they're great at doing. And you did just that. Yeah. So now you go back to Seattle and you go to work for The End and KISW, and Dave Richards hires you.
Who's now my boss. Yeah,
it's been like part of your career for a long time, it sounds like. But how did that all kind of come around? They just really liked the way that you were growing and how you're doing things?
I guess I'd have to ask Dave, but I'm sure, they like the imaging. Good to take a player away from that radio station. I was ready for me to leave I was ready to go at that station. That station there was a lot of sales and talks. It was time to go.
God, it was changing. Was that at the time kind of late 90s, early 2000s? Where
there was a lot of wheeling and dealing of that bandwidth going on, and
all that consolidation.
Yeah. And, I mean, when Dave came to me and Phil Manning, I was like, that was like hitting the jackpot. I mean, that was the big time.
For sure.
Like The End and KISW. Oh my God. Like, I made it in rock. I mean, KISW is a legend I grew up listening to, obviously. And then The End was the alternative music, station of my youth. So I was like, wow. Yeah.
Didn't get any better than that.
No.
And so are they hiring you? Are you doing the imaging now on those stations? That's like your full-time gig?
Yeah. Yeah. So back then it was 50-50 split between the two radio stations.
But that's a massive responsity for as young as you are.
I was telling Dave the other day, I was like, man, I was 22. You hired a 22-year-old? My God. I was a baby. Yeah.
So you're we're imaging these incredibly influential stations. And do you feel, are you pressured? Do you get freaked out about it? Or are you relatively just kind of calm and collected?
I think, there's at the time, it was just so exciting. I'll take on anything that was cool. Oh my God, that's so exciting. I'm going to do that. I think there was a learning experience of working in a corporate world and balancing. And, I think that was always, that was my first kind of crash course in learning how to like really work in a corporate world. And
so who had owned the Funky?
Be efficient in my work.
Who had owned, I'm sorry, I should have asked earlier, but who owned the Funky Monkey?
So it was a small group of men, the guy that was in this group was a guy named Bob Case, who was the person I originally. Okay,
got it. So it was more of kind of like a mom pop organization versus like a big corporate entity.
Yeah, and they had an LMA with the Ackerley Group, which later got bought by Clear Channel.
Okay, understood.
And then they later sold the station, I believe, to Clear Channel.
Got it. And then when you go to work at the end, who owns the end at that time?
Intercom did.
Intercom.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it's now actually the company
Came
you work
back
for
up.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all kind of worked around.
Got it. So now you're working for a corporate publicly traded company.
Yeah. I mean, Ackerley was, but it was still a very kind of small Seattle company. They owned the Seattle Supersonics, and they only had like 3 or 4 radio stations. So,
got it.
Yeah. Intercom was a much bigger operation at the time. Yeah.
Sure. And you're now working for Dave, who's a legend. So there's pressure that comes along with that.
Oh, yeah. And he was really, at the time I was one of his first hires. That station was not doing well, and he really, very successfully, as time would later, while I was there, it was already happening, but, the ratings grew and grew and grew even after I left. But he was really at the beginning of converting that radio station from this kind of old, leaning classic rock station to, what it is today.
Contemporary, sure.
Yeah. So.
Very, very cool. So that must have just been a blast and a fun
It
ride.
was. I'm not just saying this because he's my boss now, but I definitely, the experience and the production I did at that radio station, I still listen back to it. I'm like, wow, that really propelled me to where I, am now.
Great stepping down.
We did really creative stuff.
Gigantic leap in all honesty.
Yeah, and some of it, man, I listen back, I'm like, wow, you could not put that on the radio now. That was some inappropriate stuff.
So Lisa Warden hires you in DC at HFS.
Yeah.
And how did that come to be? She just reach out? Or?
I think I had kind of established a relationship with her when I was at the Funky Monkey.
Okay.
And, the opening came up. I think Infinity had hit me up about KROQ in New York, and then I knew her, and yeah.
That's a big jump because you've pretty much been in your home market the entire time. Even when you went to Tacoma, you were still in Seattle.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're going to go across the country to even a bigger market, DC.
Yeah, I was 23 at that time, so that was a big one.
What did that feel like?
It was, just moving, people in Seattle are very insular and like to stay in Seattle, and to jump out of that world, that bubble was a big move. For my personal family, I'm still the only person that doesn't live there. And so that was a big challenge, but being at a bigger company like Infinity at the time, they were part of Viacom and MTV, and I had a lot of friends that worked at MTV. So I was pretty excited that I got to be in that orbit of Viacom.
Yeah.
And I think, it was just a culture shock, living there from Seattle. It was the center of the world, and very different demographics there, and different music and
different. I always think of DC as being very buttoned up, obviously very political because it's the capital of the country, and I like DC. I like Seattle and DC a lot, but I see them as completely two different cities.
Totally, yeah.
Seattle I think has a really big art scene and music scene, and obviously the tech world, and DC was definitely in my mind. I've never lived in either market, but I could see it being very different.
DC was very it's kind of like LA. There's like here in LA, there's Hollywood, and then there's Brea.
Right.
We can get into that part later. But in DC, it was the same thing. You kind of, DC from the White House and all the political stuff. Then there's the suburbs, and, there was the Virginia suburbs and the Maryland suburbs. DC wasn't always the focus.
Got it. You think as a tourist, you think of just kind of the heart of it, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, but it was so exciting to live there for me because I'm a huge political junkie. So to actually live in DC was still to this day, I loved living there. I thought it was.
Where did you live there?
I lived right in Northwest DC on Connecticut Avenue.
Okay, so you were right in the thick of it.
I got there and I didn't know anybody. I'd like spend the weekends, walking to the White House and all the museums.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Yeah,
it is a powerful city to be immersed in.
Yeah,
it's fascinating. I completely understand that.
Yeah.
So you did the imaging for HF Festival, which was a massive music festival at RFK Stadium. You had 80,000 attendees. I mean, it's gigantic.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So that was really early days of these big, gigantic station shows. And
I was just actually texting with Lisa about that the other day.
Were you?
Yeah. I mean, that was the beginning of, that show was before Coachella. I mean, of this whole festival model that how now these shows goes. Like that was the East Coast Coachella, if you will. Like 80,000 people. And it was a known event in that market for so long.
How cool.
Yeah. And I remember that because I was, we were doing the typical, interviews backstage and I was like working back there. And then I remember in the middle of the show, I finally had a second to go walk out there and go and look at all the people. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, that stadium was legendary.
Yeah.
And 80,000 people everywhere. And Jay-Z was playing. And I mean, it was crazy.
I remember going to a Wango Tango and having a similar feeling in that. And it also shows you just the power of radio.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
The events that just can transcend the actual terrestrial signal.
I think it was I kind of sat there and I was thinking about my promos and just thinking wow, especially back then, a percentage of people heard this message on the radio station and spent, $80, $90 at the time and spent their whole day to come here based on everything that we did. And to me, that feeling was it's still to this day, it's amazing to think that people do that.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. Power. You have that power, and we'll go into this in a little bit, but you guys have done, I think, some amazing things at Audacy to make the world a better place and to use that power to put on events, but also events that benefit some amazing organizations, which I think is really a win-win when you're able to do something like that.
Yeah.
Now at this point, you're 23, 24. You've worked, this is pretty much blows my mind. You've worked for Steve Thomas, who basically invented the modern, him along with a few others, but he's really one of the founding fathers of the imaging world. You've worked with Dave Richards, and now you've worked with Lisa Warden. I mean, three just absolute legends.
Yeah,
and you're still incredibly young. And Kevin Weatherly, of all people, knocks on your door and wants you to move out here to work at Jack and KROQ. Tell me how that happened.
Yeah, so sadly, WHFS signed off the air kind of abruptly one day. And, it was a bit of a shock. The station wasn't performing sadly, but, company had some new ideas. So
that's about really quick to that. And that was still, I imagine, the days of Diary. You probably weren't quite at PPM there.
Yeah, it was still Diary. Yeah.
I always wonder those stations that kind of flipped around that era.
Yeah.
If it would have been a different story if PPM had been around.
It's funny because there was somebody I met, I don't know, a couple of years ago who grew up in that area and remembered the station going away. And they're like, well, why? That was in high school. That was all of our favorite radio stations. You were playing this music and that music and these DJs, and they knew everything about that station. They were so shocked, but they probably weren't diary holders, Cause I mean, and then you look at that particular festival, going back to that, I mean, all those people going to that festival and how, I mean, back then they didn't have, the phone to find out about this show. The way they found out was listening to the radio,
I lived that on the other side when I programmed KBIG. We were, 15, 20th, whatever it was at the time, 12 plus. And all of a sudden PPM comes around and we're top 3. Yeah. And it wasn't like overnight, like I had changed anything. The only thing that I had done was just lived through 2 different methodologies.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you think
that was the perfect format for PPM.
Totally. Yeah. But to me, that was just always so strange. You go from being, you're not very good, kid. You don't know what you're doing, to, oh my God, you're great at what you do. And I didn't really do it.
Doing the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they flip HFS.
Yeah.
So you're still in DC at that point. Did they let you go?
No, they kept me around. They had some ideas for me in the market, which was cool. And then I got an offer from SiriusXM that I was going to fulfill my dream of living in New York City. And, Kevin got wind of that and said, no, you're not going there. Typical Kevin. You're coming to LA. And I'm like, I don't want to live in LA. I was all about living on the East Coast. LA. Ugh, I don't want to live there. And, as persuasive as Kevin is, I ended up telling the movers to move my stuff to
LA. So you were
LA.
about to go to New York, work for
I had an
Sirius.
apartment there. I was ready.
Wow, so you
go.
had
That
already
was-
committed, you were ready to go.
Oh yeah, it was my dream.
And then
Live in
Kevin
New York.
Weatherly made you an offer that you couldn't refuse.
I couldn't,
Well, I don't blame you for that. Man.
Yeah,
That's
exactly, yeah.
I mean, my gosh. And do you, I'm sure you get, I got to believe you. Maybe you don't, but do you sit back and you think, my God, the people I've had the opportunity to work for, and it just keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now you've got Kevin Weatherly, who is arguably, I don't think it gets any bigger. I think about this sometimes in just the reputation, and rightfully so, of certain programmers. And I don't think it gets any bigger in the world than Kevin. I think you got like the Jim Ryans of the world. You've got, Steve Smith, who unfortunately just passed away. You've got some, really legendary programmers. But I feel like Kevin he is looked upon and revered as the biggest of the big.
Yeah, I mean, when he was calling me, it was just like, what? I was 24 at the time. And I was like, I'm talking to Kevin Weatherly. I mean, the state back to the Funky Monkey. I mean, basically, there were times we would just basically copy what KROQ was doing,
right.
at times. So, yeah, I was, it wasn't hard for me to make that decision to move here.
And how did he have an ear on what you were doing in DC? Had you been in contact, or Lisa was sending?
Yeah,
us
I mean,
stuff,
Lisa
or?
was really really helpful with that.
I see.
And
Got it.
and he had heard my stuff before at the end and KSW, and I mean, he had heard, knowing Kevin, he's always, he's always checking
there,
to see
sure.
who the next person is on every, and
So you get to LA,
Yeah.
and now what does he have you start on?
It was Jack FM.
Okay.
Yeah. That was, I mean, I literally came here blind. I didn't know really what I was doing. I just, there was some, some KROQ he kind of threw at me, but there was some other big project that he couldn't talk about. It was very secret.
Oh, and that was
FM.
Jack.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, still to this day, it is the most successful Jack it's incredible.
I mean, one of the most successful LA radio stations in the past, 17 years.
And not only do you have the mind of Kevin Weatherly on that, you've got Gary Wall, who's a brilliant mind. There's a lot.
Chris Ebbott.
Yeah. So there's a lot of chefs in that kitchen to have to. Brilliant chefs, by the way.
Oh, my God.
But,
Yeah.
But I'm sure that can't be easy when you're the one who's trying to. And the thing about Jack, so much goes in, I know a fair amount about it because we're involved on the network level. So much goes into that you do not realize, just the amount of writers, the amount of production.
Yeah.
And because most of them don't have air talent, the imaging is the centerpiece. So there's more pressure around the imaging than anything else.
Well, that was, I mean, I remember that Chris saying that to me, and Kevin, it was just like, this radio station is all about the production. We need to put everything into production because there's no jocks. It's all what comes out of the Pro Tools,
So don't fuck it up, Jake.
Yeah, exactly. No pressure there. So but it was, Gary and Kevin and Chris, they had and Mike Crank, who I need to mention also.
Crank's brilliant.
Were, taking care of it before I got there. And they had all these different, principles of the different aspects of the radio station, and we established the writing team, but it was really, I mean, what I was going to say is like, it really was an open slate of what we wanted to do. Because the key of that radio station was creating something for LA.
Right.
I mean, the music they were playing was just, so catered to LA. Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I didn't really love the music, and, I was a kid at the time.
Your favorite song was Chaka Khan.
Yeah, exactly. I knew that one. Yeah. Why are you guys playing that one? I was like, I like that one. No, it was like, what was it? Oingo Boingo?
Yeah.
What is this song? I've never heard this song. There's so many of these artists that were like these. I didn't know about KROQ 80s music or anything. Like, and they were like new songs to me.
That's the funniest thing, because you obviously grew up in the Seattle area. I grew up here. I grew up out in the desert, but we listened to LA radio, and so that was all music I absolutely adore. And so it was so incredibly important in really just kind of how it shaped me musically. KROQ was,
Definitely,
and so I grew up on Depeche Mode and The Cure, and all the songs that you hear now in excess, and these bands that you hear now on Jack.
I remember, speaking of Depeche Mode, it was like Depeche Mode played, I think, right after I moved here, and they got me tickets. Like kind of like, hey, here, you should learn what this music is. And I was like, first of all, I knew all their songs.
Yeah.
I love them. I wasn't like a huge fan or anything, but I knew them all. But I was like shocked at the crowd.
Yeah.
Talk about a crowd. A Depeche Mode show at Staples Center. Like, wow. That got me. That was
an event.
Crash course.
Yeah.
In 80s KROQ.
Yeah. So now you're doing Jack. You're in a pressure cooker. It's obviously, and not that you've always been in major markets, but there is something about LA in New York that just, there's that added amount of pressure that's on you.
Yeah. And the station was blowing up. It was doing well. I remember like my stuff being moved and like going on to All Access and reading about all these radio stations, like adjusting their formats to the Jack, the random radio or whatever you want to call it, or, 80s, 90s and everything else. Or, and I remember like, wow, like this is real. I am really in the middle of, the hottest thing in radio right now.
Yeah. You are not only geographically in the middle of it, but just formatically as well. There was just, everything was happening around you.
And there's also, especially back then, there was just something about LA radio that, the celebrities would be listening to these radio stations. You knew that when you came here, but like you really kind of felt it. And then, then I went in and I remember Ebbott told me to go drive around in the market, and I was like shocked at the sheer size of the metropolitan area. I drove to, Chino, or I can't remember, even Burbank seemed far to me. Like there was just
really getting out there and exploring.
Oh yeah. And Glendale's a big one for me too.
So now you're doing not only legendary brands, but you've got legendary events that go on along these. You're doing Weenie Roast imaging, Coachella imaging,
the Jack shows,
the Acoustic Christmas.
Yeah.
So all of these are just incredibly high profile events.
Yeah, Kevin would always kind of let me jump in on certain KROQ projects. Probably not everybody loved that, but. I got to do some of the big KROQ promos, just because of, we're all kind of one team there.
What was that like hearing a Weenie Roast promo, for instance, for the first time that you'd produced on the air?
I'm not going to lie. I remember, producing it, getting it all done and like hearing it play on the air. And like, I was in tears. I'm not going to lie. It was like the most amazing radio experience to hear whoa, I did that?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like,
I so get that.
Wow. Yeah.
I so get that. And to come across that frequency and it just means something on so many different levels.
Yeah. And just, I haven't done a ton of work at KROQ in my, but just to have a little things here and there is still like a highlight of my radio career, especially even in that period of time too. Talk about the hottest format in radio. In LA, it was, KROQ in the early 2000s. Come on.
You're 24, 25.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any better than that. That's just congratulations, man. Just to be able to say you did that. Yeah. Put aside all your success, and can't wait to talk about that, but just to say you did that and live that.
It's cool, But I do got to give the credit to Trevor Chan and Mike Crank, because those are the guys that really did the heavy lifting back then.
No, I get it. Yeah. Incredible talents. So let's talk a little bit about the topicals and the topical sweeps that are still used today, and how those came to be.
It is funny because, I do love this story. It's like, so I was there, and God, I was like, wow, I moved here for this music, and I could see it blowing up. I was like, man, this is music my dad listens to sometimes. And and then there was kind of the framework that Gary and Kevin and all these guys put together, which was great, a bunch of songs in a row. But I kind of was like, well, we don't have any DJs. Like, let's put some topical stuff on. We got Howard Kogan basically sitting here on call.
Sure.
When he's just sitting in the studio, ready for copy.
And so witty in his own right.
Yeah, and lots of opinions.
one or two.
Yeah. And so I said, let's try it. 5 o'clock. We'll just do something topical. And there was, back then it was, there was, God, somebody had this term somewhere. It's not an MSNBC, but it was like a one stream kind of consciousness of media back then.
Sure.
Where there was one thing that people were always kind of everybody talking about.
Right.
Now things are so fragmented with TikTok and everything. But yeah, there's I was like every day there was some topical funny thing to talk about. So we made it at 5 o'clock. We tried one line and threw it in this mix. Then we turned it into two. Then we started moving it on, getting more writers involved and doing it throughout the day. And and it all kind of just came out of my boredom of like not really liking the music on the station and saying, hey, let's be topical. Let's do something interesting. And it's kind of cool to see that's still part of the DNA of the station.
That is actually my very there's so many things I love about Jack. And again, in full transparency, we image the network side of Jack. And very incredibly proud of that. But I absolutely adore the topicals. This is really an LA-centric thing, but we had a chain of amazing sporting goods stores called Sports Chalet, and they've been here for years and years and years. And it was like a regional chain, and they had a jingle: "Sports Chalet, we'll take it to the limit." And they unfortunately went bankrupt. This was probably 5, 6, 7 years ago.
I remember the name.
And that day when it went bankrupt, and it was on the local news, it was a pretty big story, and you guys had a topical, well, I guess Sports Chalet, you took it to the limit.
That's so perfect. That's exactly.
It was actually phrased better than what I just said, but it was so funny. And that was just like, you guys were so, and you still are to this day, so on top of it. And
Ralph and Justin Cranfill or John Showen are still there, right? And Mike Crank, obviously, are still there. Doing the same stuff, and they still have that same system of like getting stuff on the air.
And you just never know what you're going to hear. And that's what I love about it.
And I kind of love being in the position I'm in now, or have been the last 10, 12 years, where I'm not involved with that station. And I get to, now I'm in the target demographic of that radio station. I get to like hear these things. I'm like, that's funny. That's good. Oh man, I love this song. Like I really get to enjoy the radio station.
Enjoy it as a listener. Yeah, it's incredibly well done. It's awesome to hear that was how it was created and it's still on the air today. So in 2009, you guys get the green light to launch a CHR called AMP and go up against KISS. I mean, how it was prior to that, it was 97.1 KLSX. It was the
FM Talk.
FM Talk.
And that was the our last recession, and the economics worked that a CHR was ready to go in the market, or more or less the cluster needed something like that,
right?
Because we're a very male dominated cluster.
That's right. And a little bit of background, because I was at Clear Channel at the time, iHeart. And so iHeart was really prided themselves on being this wall of women.
I've heard that one.
So, you had all the female targeted radio stations. And Intercom, CBS had this now wall of men, if you will. And so there was this amazing opportunity. And so you guys seized it, and you're now put at the helm of the imaging. So
which really, of all the things I culminated from working at KUBE, then to being in LA, doing a CHR in LA, that's the kind of music I loved at the time, especially like to be able to do that was amazing. And it was something that I had always like encouraged, people I've worked for will always say that I have opinions. And, I would make imaging and stuff like, well, what if we tried it? Hey, I got this idea. And it's like, hold on, kid. Like,
interesting. So you kind of use that to
plant
seeds.
We've already thought, but, it was like finally something kind of like clicked with management. Like, oh, this could actually be a good idea. Anyway, to make a long story short, they gave us the green light and we signed on AMP Radio. And
I loved that imaging. I loved the top of the hour. I thought top of the hour was fantastic. I was obviously a P1 to it. I listened to it all the time, and it became and still is in some markets, You were in how many markets? I know you had like Philly and Detroit and what were some of
Boston, Orlando. We had kind of a version of it in San Diego.
and
I'm missing a couple.
and they had you
Detroit. Oh, you said Detroit.
and they had you do the imaging for all those or oversee it?
I would do a lot of the different launches, not always.
Okay.
Yeah, but I did a lot. I did the New York, Philly, Orlando. I was involved with it. Detroit, I guess I was involved with it at different points. San Diego, definitely. So most of them I had some involvement at some point, if not the launch, something after. Yeah.
And what was that just kind of putting a station on the air for the first time? What did that feel like?
I mean, pretty stressful to be honest. There's the systems we have now make it a lot easier, but man, there was a lot of coordination, and we, different systems in different markets. I mean, there was nothing uniform at the companies back then.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of times it came down to actually flying into the market. Can you believe that?
Wow.
And bringing my laptop and having the production on there and loading it into the system, or having to be there unfortunately when people were let go and trying to get it on the air.
Oh wow.
Or transferring a ton of files.
So they'd kind of jump you or drop you in like.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There were times where I had worked in a different office and then had to come in there when the coast was clear. But yeah, it's a very stressful thing. It's not, it's more of just coordinating everything and getting it all right and making sure there's no mistakes and, learning different ways things are done in different markets. I mean, it back then it wasn't as easy, I think, as it is now.
While you're doing AMP, you are imaging We Can Survive, which was what I mentioned earlier, was I thought phenomenal because that was a great event. Do you guys still do that or is it gone? But that helped breast cancer awareness.
Yeah.
And
then,
I just thought it was
last year was mental health.
Yeah. So just great shows that not only were entertaining and a lot of fun, but they backed a fantastic cause.
And at the Hollywood Bowl too.
Yeah.
That show is an amazing show.
Legendary venue, if not the most famous venue.
Exactly. I mean, it's the Hollywood Bowl. I mean, there's something like, I go to, with my friends group, we go to a lot of shows there and I, see everybody there. And what's kind of cool is on We Can Survive, like I'm walking in there and it's like, wow, it's our event, like at this legendary LA worldwide venue.
Right.
And then all of a sudden my voice comes on and it's coming through the speakers or something I worked on.
Yeah.
And like, that's like, again, that experience where like, whoa, this is the Hollywood Bowl. Like, oh my God.
Gotta be surreal.
I can't believe I'm sitting here. Yeah. Totally.
And thank you that's a perfect segue, by the way. Was AMP the catalyst for your VO career? When did you first start to go, hey, I should pursue doing voiceover? I've got a talent for this.
It was a little bit before AMP was on the air, but that did kind of set me in motion because I was doing some of the VO on AMP and I kind of got cast as that other CHR voice for that flanker, if you will.
Right.
Voiceover for CHR stations. So I really do. Yeah. I mean that, I was already kind of doing it. I was picking up some CHR stations and some alternative stations just from the work I had done.
And where did you, it takes guts to put yourself out there because I think there's.
Try doing a podcast.
This doesn't take nearly the guts. I promise you, this is very easy. Yeah. So I think when you put your voice out there, it's different. When you're imaging, you're obviously a phenomenal artist, and this is just my interpretation of it. Mm-hmm. But you can hide a little bit as an imaging director. I don't want to say that's not the right way of saying it, but you're not out there in the same way, I believe, as a VO talent. When you put yourself out there as a VO talent, that all of a sudden it's one of the same as you. It's almost like being a model in some ways. It's like a characteristic, and so
I don't know. I do have to say something about that because living in LA as long as I have, I know a lot of actors.
Right.
And I know what they go through when it comes to auditioning and, when they're up there, it's their face, it's the way they're acting. Like all we're doing as VO people is our voice.
Okay, true. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
I'm comparing it to that.
Yeah, but it's a good comparison.
Yeah.
I still feel that you really are putting yourself out there and are opening yourself up for rejection. Like, I don't like your voice, or I don't like the way, whatever it is, and having to put that out there. Because not only when you're putting that piece of imaging in front of Kevin Weatherly, let's say, or Chris Ebbott, whoever it is, to approve, they're now listening not only to how you produced it and how you made it, but then how you voiced it as well.
Yeah,
so it's
that's
like
true. Yeah, I guess when you're doing it, all of it, you can't blame it on the bad VO guy.
Yeah,
like that,
exactly. I guess that's a better way of putting it. Did you ever think of it that way? Did it put more pressure on you, or just kind of just flowed easily?
I don't really think so. No.
Huh?
Yeah. I mean, I don't love producing my own voice. I'll, definitely do it. I like producing other people's voices.
Interesting.
But yeah, I guess you're right. I never thought of it that way.
Kinda
But yeah,
makes
it does. You are really, exposing yourself.
Yeah.
You do all of it because, you can't blame somebody else.
Not
You really
to,
can't.
not to put undue pressure on you.
I guess you have a Benztown.
There you go. Blame Benztown. Blame Andy.
Got to blame somebody, right? No.
No, I mean, congrats. And your VO career has just been amazing. And again, full transparency. We've worked with Jake for many years, and it's an honor to work with you. And I always love seeing when new deals are coming down for you. And he's been on the Benztown voiceover list for 7 years in a row.
I appreciate all the support you guys have given me throughout the years.
Happy to do it.
Great partner, yeah.
You've been amazing to work with. Yeah. So you've been now with Intercom, which is now, of course, Audacy.
Yeah.
You moved here initially. What year was it when you moved here?
2005.
2005. So you're now, what is this, 17th year? Am I doing math?
Yeah,
correct?
17, yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I know.
Amazing.
And I really only thought I'd be here for a couple of years, and I'd, kind of do my time here and move to New York. And, now it's like, hell no. I'm here. Like,
LA's an amazing city.
Oh, it is. Yeah. And also, like, growing up in Seattle, I was raised to hate LA. We hate California. Seattle.
Sure.
Still do. And, so I, but the fact that I love it here so much is saying a lot.
So who comes to you? How does your new role as the director of imaging and sound design, how did that come to be? Which, congratulations again.
Thank you.
Is so amazing. I'm so happy for you on a lot of levels. But it's also just great to see your friends go on to do wonderful and amazing things. So congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sadly, AMP sadly went off the air. It was called Now when it went off the air. And, I got to give a lot of credit to Jeff Federman and Jeff Sotolano and the whole programming team and Chris Ebbott. Would have been probably an easy time to sunset my career at Audacy. But, fortunately, those guys said, hey, you've expressed a lot of interest. You have a lot of opinions. Let's try to find something new for you within the company. And, within a couple months, it just became very clear that there was a need for a role of somebody overseeing the imaging at Audacy. Yeah, I think a lot of our competitors have that same role. We really didn't. So,
that's a gigantic role. Obviously, there's 280 stations.
238, I think.
230. So 200.
Right, I should probably know that.
Yeah.
For sure.
So 240 stations.
Like
there's a lot. Almost
of
all
stations.
in major markets.
Yeah.
Massive PPM markets, and you've got Audacy, just some legendary radio stations. And what's kind of your day to day now?
Well, I mean, last week was really my first week starting, so
just getting into it.
TBD. But right now it's just a lot of kind of getting to know a lot of the people at the company. I've always kind of been a local guy, and we've kind of been kind of on my own island here in LA.
Sure.
So now I'm really learning all these new people at the company, and there's a lot of different projects we have that we're working on that they're coming up. So I've kind of been jumping on those. We have things like I'm Listening, all of our big events. So these are all things that I'm getting involved in, but I'm really having to meet the players and see where imaging fits in, because it was kind of done, but not in a way where there's somebody overseeing the imaging, making sure that, we're consistent and we're doing all these things. Now there's somebody that can oversee that.
My hats off. I think that it's really good to see that the craft is being taken so seriously. Mm-hmm. And exactly, I love that. And I think you do that on the commercial. Audacy does that on the commercial production side. I think Dylan Riggs is phenomenal at what he does on the commercial production side. And I think so much art, and probably more than anything, if I look back over the last, almost 30 years I've been in this business, when you had mentioned when you first went to go work for Steve Thomas, and he was in this little kind of nondescript office with didn't even have any acoustical treatment in it, and here he's a full-on legend, kind of working those conditions. It was the same thing for me when I was at KFMB in San Diego. Our imaging guy, Tom Watts, who's now at Sirius, he was in this little tiny crummy closet, basically.
Yeah.
Imaging, I don't think, was given the attention that it needed. And I love to see that it's taken so seriously now, and it's looked at being as important it is, and it's such a fabric of these radio stations, these properties.
Exactly. I mean, such an important part of what we do at Audacy. And not only in that, and we obviously have a very large digital footprint. It's very important there as well. And the fact that the company's investing in imaging is, obviously made it really appealing for me to really take this offer very seriously, because it's like, wow, like we're not going in the wrong direction. We're going in the correct direction,
Yeah.
And I really like the way the company is focusing on that.
No, I agree with that. I think it's great to see, and I don't think they could have picked a better person. So congratulations on that.
Man. I'm really excited, and it's been it is funny because it's been really weird because other imaging people on here might understand this, but I've for the 20 years I've had this same pace of worrying about the weekend promo. Are the sweepers updated enough? And like this last Friday, I was like, oh my gosh, wow. I don't know, I'm not worrying about a weekend promo or anything. Wow, I'm gonna enjoy the weekend. I'm like, wow. This is kind of cool. I kind of like this corporate life. Yeah.
Enjoy it while you can,
Exactly.
because now you've got 238 other fires that can pop up at any given time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Talk to me in 3 months, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Jake, I want to thank you so much for just being so supportive of Benztown over the years. You've been incredible to us. But secondly, man, I just want to congratulate you.
Thank you.
On the success, and it is really just great to see a friend and someone with your talent to land in a position like this. It's incredible, man.
Yeah, no, and to be on your podcast is like, I was looking at all the different names on there, and like seeing my name on there is actually really surreal. I was like, wow, he wants me on that? I'm in. Yeah.
No,
but
it's an honor
I appreciated working with you guys throughout the years.
Likewise, man. I wish you nothing more but a tremendous amount of success, which I'm sure you're going to continue to have, and really look forward to just watching your career and all the amazing things. And I'll be listening. I can promise you that.
Exactly. Right. Right on your radio.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, man.
Or the Audacy app.
Or the Audacy app. Great plug. You see, you're really you're getting this corporate position really well. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you coming in.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Chachi Loves Everybody. If you like the show, we hope you'll leave us a 5-star rating and tell your friends. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. This has been a Benztown podcast production, hosted and researched by Dave Chachi Dennis. Executive producer, Kevin Horton. Produced and edited by Tom Green. Show coordinator, Juliana Parisi and Laura Keeney.